You're listening to the Family Discipleship Podcast, a podcast of Training the Church. This is Adam Griffin, and I'm here with my co-host today, Mrs. Cassie Bryant. Chelsea couldn't make it, but Cassie, this is pretty special. Last year, I asked you who would be your dream guest for our podcast, and you did not say Taylor Swift. You didn't say Justin Bieber. You didn't say Vladimir Putin. You didn't say Tom Cruise. You didn't say Tim Tebow. Who did you say would be your dream guest for the podcast?
I think I said Dolly Parton, but a quick, like a good runner-up was Andrew Peterson. No, just kidding.
Well, Dolly couldn't make it today. You said
Peterson.
Andrew Peterson. You said Andrew Peterson.
I did.
So I wanted to give you a chance right off the top. We don't normally do this, but Cassie, would you like to gush for a second? Because we have your dream guest on the podcast today.
Yes, I know. Man, our family has been so shaped by Andrew Peterson. Big fans of Behold the Lamb of God. We started going to those concerts in Texas in 2009. And started taking our girls to their Texas shows like 4 years ago. And my oldest daughter is a big fan of Sky's music. And yeah, we're just like and of course, Clipwood Forest and Wingfeather Saga. My youngest daughter is finishing the last book right now. And so they actually told me this morning, please tell him hi. And we'd love for him to write a new series. So I have 3 daughters, Andrew.
Well, what an honor to have with us today, the creative genius, artist, apiarist, author.
Yeah.
Cassie, Andrew Peterson is with us today. Andrew,
Wow.
how you doing?
Thank you. You guys are so kind.
Just kidding.
Well, it's good to meet you guys.
Yeah.
Good
thanks.
to meet you too.
Well, Andrew, you're an artist and an author. You seem to be endlessly creative. Would you share with us how being a dad has shaped kind of those spheres, those creative spheres for you?
I think, well, I'll just start by saying that I am the proud husband of Jamie. We've been married for 29 years, and we have 3 grown children who are all married. And so
Wow.
have 3 in-law, like 1 son-in-law and 2 daughters-in-law, and 1 grandbaby now. So, which is
Wow.
awesome.
Go.
And so we're in a really sweet season right now. And one of the things that I have been not wrestling with, that makes it sound like it's a bad thing, but just curious about, I should say, is which well to draw from now that my kids are out of the house. You know what I mean? Like so much of what I was doing, I had them in my mind as one of the audiences, you know, and a lot of my songs, if you know, the songs on my albums, they're often about my life and about my family and my marriage and my children. And they were such a present, constant part of our lives. And then when I wrote the Wingfeather Saga, you know, the kids were the first audience for those books. You know, I got to read them chapters as I was writing them. And so that was one of my big motivations, was like, I just want to get to my kids' hearts and their imagination somehow. And so now that I'm kind of in this empty nester season and I just turned 50, I'm just kind of going like, trying to figure out I guess what I'm saying is that my children and my family life was such a huge driver of my creativity, not just noble reasons. Part of it was just because I wanted to be able to buy diapers and pay the mortgage, you know. Right. It's a scary time when your kids are little and you're working and you're self-employed and you're doing all the stuff. And so there's a lot of things that can drive creativity. And so now I'm in the season where I've got a lot of ideas, but I'm also just enjoying some stillness and enjoying being a grandpa. And I don't have that same fire that I used to have. That said, I'm still doing a lot of stuff. I'm still on the road a lot, and I love playing concerts, but it just feels a little different, trying to decipher that.
Yeah, I love that. We are, our church is going to be there when you come through Dallas. That's where Cassie and I are, and we're excited about that. We also want to talk about, speaking of new projects, we want to talk about your new book here in a second, The Prince of Yorsha Doon. But first, I want to say too, that as much as Cassie is like a super fan, I don't want you to think that I'm like, I was against having you on. My boys are also like, our family are big Wingfeather Saga fans. They're in the middle of season 2 right now in the animated series, but they've read the books. They're big readers in general, which is why I was so grateful for you writing good fiction. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but I'd love to hear from you first. Like, what was it like to see an idea that starts kind of as something you're thinking about blessing your family with, leading your family with. You put it from your mind onto paper, and now you get to see the imagination of so many kids now kind of come realized in an animated series. What's it like to see a story go through all those phases to be where it's at now?
Oh, it's just so fun. I mean, I will say it's a lot more work than I thought was going to be. Making a TV show is super hard. And I say that as the guy who's not doing the heavy lifting. Like I get to be in the room while the animation team and the director and all that, and I have, some creative say in what's going on, which is great. But I just can't believe how much goes into it. One episode of a TV show. It's just crazy. The amount of people and work and heart that goes into it. So it's just been really fun to be a part of that. And also at times kind of overwhelming, but then the reach of a TV show is so broad, and I know people are discovering the books because of the show. And the best thing about it to me is that it feels like the story has separated from me sort of and become its own thing in a way that is really awesome. I was just telling somebody this, like when you write a song, what you hope is that the song will have a life of its own apart from you, right? You hope that it goes out into the world and does its thing, which the analogy for me is you hope that it graduates high school and goes to college and gets a job and moves out, right? You want it to be on its own so that you can sit back and enjoy the fruit of the labor or whatever. And so, man, the first time I saw at the premiere of season 1 of the Wingfeather Saga, and there were like 1,000 people in the room and there's kids dressed up like the characters, like they were not thinking about me. They were thinking about the characters in the story. Yeah. You know what I mean? They were thinking about the story. Their imagination was getting swept away. And I just think that's the best feeling. To be kind of anonymous in the room while all that's going on is awesome.
And so nobody was wearing an Andrew Peterson costume?
No, I didn't see one.
Okay. Well, my kids keep asking me what I'm wearing for Halloween this year. Maybe I'm going to work that out. I'm going to see what I can put together.
Get some bags underneath your eyes.
My daughters fought over who could be Lily because there's only one, I guess there's more than one female character, but there's one little girl character, and so I have 3 daughters and they were like, y'all can just all be Lily. It's fine.
Yeah, they can all be Lily.
Yes. So for families who already love the Wingfeather Saga, what will they find familiar in the Prince of Yorsha Doon, and what's different about your new project?
Yeah. So one of the really fun things about the last few years has been, the 4 books of the Wingfeather Saga are canon, and they aren't moving. That's it. But one of the best parts of writing fantasy is the fact that you get to do this world building and write these imaginary histories and kind of fill in the gaps with stuff. And the books have these ridiculous footnotes all scattered through to try to convey a feeling of a real world, a world with its own history. And so now that the main series is done, there's all these other stories that have kind of spun out of it. And it's just been a blast. I didn't come up with the idea. I wrote the Prince of Yorsha Doon as a short story in Wingfeather Tales, which is a collection of short stories by a bunch of different authors, all set in the Wingfeather world. And then somebody at the publishing company thought this would make a great picture book, which was really exciting because the books are kind of scary. The Wingfeather Saga, there's a plenty of peril in those stories. And I'll get emails from parents like, what age should I start with? And it's kind of like, read chapter 1 to them. And if that's too much, maybe you should wait a year or 2. And so I generally say 8 and up, but it depends on the kid. But now to have a book that's a picture book that allows the little brothers and sisters who are watching the older siblings kind of get into this thing. Now there's a way for them to dip their toes into that world is really fun. So, and I think my favorite thing about it, well, the artwork is amazing. Christina Kister just did an amazing job of doing this. But I'm now a grandfather, and I got to sit my granddaughter in my lap and share the Wingfeather world with her in a way that I had never been able to do before. So I'm just pumped about it.
That's cool. Being passed to the next generation. That's really,
that's
really fun. Our podcast focuses on sharing our faith at home with the next generation. You are such a gifted wordsmith and storyteller. As you were raising your own kids, did storytelling play a role in how you shared your faith?
Yes. That's the simple answer.
Yeah.
I will say I just finished a book today called The Inklings by Humphrey Carpenter, which was written, I think, in the 70s, kind of a history of Lewis and Tolkien and their friends. And I'd read a lot about them, but I'd never read that book. And my son came over to drop off my granddaughter, because we watch her a couple days a week, and he saw it on the couch. And Jamie told me that he saw the book sitting there, and he laughed because he was like, "It's like Pops is reading the book that people think Pops sits around and reading."
Your brand.
It's perfect sense.
Yeah, I was so guilty. I was like, "Yeah, I guess I am that guy right now." But our kids grew up with. We just took storytelling really seriously as a family, and that wasn't just books. It was also, I mean, what a joy as a parent to get to curate the movies your kids watch, you know?
Yeah.
And to get to have a say in like, ooh, and I'm going to show them this one and tell them why it's great and tell them why it means something to me. And the funny thing is, the first movie that popped into my head that I did that with was The Three Amigos. But anyway,
my husband would be very happy. My husband would be interested in reading that guide, like how to talk with your kids about themes and Three Amigos.
Sure.
And The Three Amigos.
Oh yeah, big fan of that movie.
The thing is that, like, I think it is so. We can put a lot of pressure on ourselves as parents to tease out Sunday school lessons from stories, right? And I don't think that's a great place to start. I think first you have to delight in the story, and you have to kind of geek out about how good the story is, and let the story do its own work. Because anybody who's ever been to a movie with a group of friends, you know, at the conversation afterwards is that everybody got a little bit of a different take on it. You know, certain lines popped out to this person that didn't pop out to this person. I have gone to movies that I hated until I talked about that movie with a friend of mine. And by the end of the conversation, I was like, what a brilliant movie. I didn't even know. So I guess what I'm saying is that, like, the way we enjoyed stories as a family was just to enjoy stories as a family. And our conversations about the gospel and Jesus's presence in our home was interwoven in a way that was very consistent. One of my favorite quotes when I was from a mentor of ours was that he said, Christianity ought to be as ordinary in your home as dirty laundry and cornflakes.
That's good.
And I love that quote because it just reminds it, like, we wanted to be the kind of family that would stop at the drop of a hat and pray about something if somebody asked us to. We tried not to sequester Sundays as Jesus time and the rest of it. So that means that when we're watching a movie, sometimes we just watch the movie or read the book and geek out about what a great story it is. And sometimes that story organically finds its way to what the gospel might, how the gospel might shed light on our own hearts in light of this story. And so I was wary of seeing good stories as merely a way to teach them a Sunday school lesson. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just think that there's a mystery at work that I could talk about this for days, and I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, but there's a feeling when I was a young man, I would write songs and I would have very specific things in my mind that I wanted that song to do for people. Right. And that's okay. There's nothing terrible about going, I'm going to write a song for this person because they're sad, or this person for their wedding or whatever. But inevitably, the stories that I hear later about what the song ended up doing, those stories are always surprising to me because it's not what I meant. Like, people will email me and say, man, I love this song because of this. And I'll be like, I never would have thought that's what that song was going to do.
Yeah, that's
right.
Good.
So the Holy Spirit gets to inhabit our work in a way that we can't control. We can have hopes for what happens, but his intention for the song is far better than anything we could come up with on our own. And we also might not know the fruit of the song until the wedding supper of the Lamb. Yeah. When we meet some person who heard it 400 years after we wrote it. You know what I mean? So it just releases us of the need to control the outcome of the work that we're doing. Right. Yeah. And so when I write the Wingfeather Saga, my goal is to wake up longing in a kid's heart, to give them that flutter in their stomach that I remember when I watched Raiders of the Lost Ark or whatever. And then I get to sit back and eat popcorn and watch the ways the Lord uses it. Right. Yeah. And the stories that I've heard from people, I just heard one month or two ago from somebody who told me about how their grandfather became a Christian while reading a section of book 4 of the Wingfeather Saga. He came out of the room, he was resistant to Christianity, and he was reading the books because he wanted to have something to talk about with his grandchildren. And he came out of the room and told his wife that he'd just given his life to Jesus.
Wow.
And she said, why? And when he explained the scene, it was like something that to me was like, what? Like, I never would have thought that that would have been the thing, right? So what a beautiful thing that is, because it means that God gets the credit for that. Like, I can't say, oh, good, well, my plan worked. I wrote that scene in the whatever. That's ridiculous. So I think that's how we tried to approach the art and the music, was to just kind of give it a lot of room to breathe and do its own thing in the hearts of our kids.
Yeah. I love what you said about the story kind of takes on a life of its own, and giving it permission to do that, especially when it's you that, has written the stories and the songs. But for us as people who are watching stories, I can often jump to, my mind starts going to work. As someone who's written curriculum and like I've worked in children's ministry for, 20 years. And I'm like, okay, where can I find the gospel story in this story? And how can I point to, this part, rather than I just needed to receive that, just enjoy the story and then let it take shape and let the conversations around it, explore that, rather than me try to come in and control the narrative and control the way my kids see the narrative.
And at the same time, I want to applaud you for doing that, because it is so important to teach your kids how to like responsibly engage with media. You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
Keep their thinking cap on. I'm not suggesting that they don't pay attention to when a story is telling a lie beautifully. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's so good to equip them to know these things.
Yeah. Or see the truth in surprising places, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's fascinating to do that. It's one of the things, like, our kids grew up we're a very musical home. And so I from an early age, I wanted my kids to listen to great songs, whether or not the person was a Christian. I'd rather them listen to a great song by somebody who's not a Christian than a bad song by somebody who was. And so to teach them this discernment, but also to teach them, let's ask ourselves about where this person's coming from and what the story's doing. And it hopefully equipped them to engage with media in a different way. Like, I should probably stop talking. I get fired up when I get excited about this stuff.
Well, you're going to keep talking because we have another question for you. So, and if you'd rather keep going with your line of thinking rather than pivot to this question, but I'd love to just, for our listeners to hear how being a dad impacted the way you saw the gospel, and even a grandfather now. How do you see the gospel story for yourself, and how did it change when you became a dad?
Oh, wow. I think it would take a book to really get to the bottom of all that.
We'll read it. You can write it.
The first thing that comes to mind, though, is I grew up in a church context where my dad was a pastor. And so I and it wasn't, I don't have any really bad stories about, having grown up in an evangelical Southern Christian situation. Like, my dad was a good guy and my parents were, they did their best and all that. But it was still, I think because it was culturally Southern, it was a little bit performative, maybe a little bit legalistic. And that wasn't anybody's, like, I can't point my finger and say if it's this person's fault. I know my dad was preaching the gospel, right?
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, the way that I would have explained the gospel to you as a young man was that if you behaved, God would let you go to heaven. And so it was not the gospel at all. It completely missed the good news of the gospel, right? And I think a lot of people do think that that if you're good, you go to heaven. If you're bad, you go to hell. And that's kind of the story. That's there's no good news in that. And so I carried around this real fear that God was always angry at me. That there was this, yes, he's loving, but there's this thin veneer of love that is covering over an ocean of wrath. And that if I'm not careful, if I pick at the love part, then I'm going to, there's going to be this breach, and all of a sudden I'm going to experience the wrath of God. And so I missed the whole God the Father part. And it was easy for me to imagine God being mad at me because I knew what a sinner I was. I know what a sinner I am. And so it's easy for me to beat myself up and to agree, yes, I am worthy of scorn. I am all these things. And encountering first the music of Rich Mullins, and then a whole body of work by a lot of wonderful authors and going to a church that actually preached the gospel in a really profound way, I began to slowly believe that maybe God loved me as I am and not as I should be. And then I had my first son. Mm. And I mean, my goodness, even having kids and loving them as completely as we do, it's still hard to connect that to the depth of love that God has for us. Yeah. You still have to fight to do it. But I remember being super afraid that I was selfish. I think a lot of new parents deal with this, where they're like worried that, am I going to be able to love this lump that shows up on delivery day? And I was afraid that I was going to be that Aiden, my firstborn, was going to be the moment when I realized that how terrible I really was, that I'm so selfish that I'm going to have, I'm not going to be able to love him completely or whatever. And of course that completely changes when you hold this little baby for the first time. You realize your heart grows three sizes that day. And, you would immediately give your life for this creature. But still, I remember there was one of those like chest, I don't know what they're called, but little baby carrier things that we had way back in the day. And we like to go on hikes, and Aiden was probably a month old, and I was carrying him. And Jamie and I were out walking through the woods, and I tripped and fell really bad. Like I fell straight forward, and without even thinking, I took the whole fall. I protected him, and I landed on my forearms on these sharp rocks, and he was fine, but my arms were bleeding. And I just burst into tears because I realized that my instinct was to love him first, that like something in me had changed, and God had allowed this selfish person to grow a little bit more like Jesus, just by virtue of Aiden coming into my life. And I was so relieved. I was like, I remember just laying there crying and realizing like, I've got the thing, whatever the thing is that makes you like Jesus and allows you to love selflessly, instinctively, is in there, and that is going to grow over the course of our entire lives. Always. We're always working that out. But I think that was the beginning of the light bulb going on, and understanding the depth of God's love for me.
That's good. I love that you called it the thing. That's so good. Like the Lord has the thing. We get the thing. We get to grow in the thing. That's so good. I want to jump back to some of the storytelling talk we were having too. This is such a blessing to me already. But, one of the things that has always kind of driven my sons just a little batty about Christian fiction. And I don't want to nag on Christian fiction. I'm grateful for so much Christian fiction and so many Sunday school lessons. But when my sons open Christian fiction, they're like, oh, that's David, that's Goliath. I know how this whole book's going to go. Or, hey, that's Jesus. Those are the disciples. And so it's Christian fiction, but it's like, it's Christian nonfiction with some little twists and turns in there. And so that's been hard. It's part of what they have loved about Wingfeather Saga is it's a beautiful story. And in some ways, there's familiarity bred through this unfamiliar world, and there's something beautiful that's kind of knit together and woven. And I know that as Christians, we're people of this book and people of this incredible story. So it makes sense to us that we kind of want to weave it into everything. We know this incredible epic in which we play a role, right? So we have a story that we want the whole world to know. And I see how storytelling actually helps us make disciples. I'm wondering, as you looked around, maybe before Wingfeather Saga or maybe since, and you think about the state of Christian storytelling, why do you think there's such a shortage for us? If we're so caught up in this big story and we see this big story, why aren't we the ones kind of driving the culture with like, let me tell you another story that will give you a glimpse of this truth that we know? Why does it seem like we're kind of on the bench some of the time? Where's Christian storytelling? How do you see it? And why is there a shortage of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I have a few thoughts. One is, thank goodness God doesn't need us to be great storytellers for him to do his good work, right?
That's true.
I think that I used to gripe a lot about Christian music or whatever when I was deep in the industry, and I had these high ideals about what a good Christian song should be and all that kind of stuff. And then I would sit in church. I mean, it still happens sometimes. I'll be in church and we'll sing some song that I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is so dumb. The phrasing is so bad, the whatever. And Jamie is often, used to stand between me and my daughter, Sky. And Sky, I raised her she's a lot like me, and that way she's a way better songwriter than I am. But we would both cringe at the same things, lyrical choices or whatever. It's ridiculous. And then I would look, while I was judging the song, I would look around and see people with their hands in the air crying and be like, man, I'm the one with the problem. God doesn't need the song to be perfect. However, that doesn't let us off the hook, right? If you're an artist, we're also called to do excellent work and glorify God by with the work of our hands as much as we're able, and to kind of shoot for it, like
Amen.
To not be content with mediocrity. So that's my first thought. My second thought is, I think it's important to remember that what we think of as Christian fiction isn't the only Christian fiction, that there's this Christian fiction or Christian music industrial complex that's churning out this stuff, right?
Right.
And I think the masses kind of assume that this is this the best we've got? And I want to be like, well, no, that's just what the media is telling you is Christian fiction.
That's good.
There's actually a ton of great work out there. It's just not getting promoted on, Christian radio or whatever, and so that's part of where the Rabbit Room came from, the ministry that I'm a part of. Like it was kind of maddening to see all these really amazing songwriters who were never going to get played on the radio, and then I would have these conversations with people who said they didn't like Christian music, and I'd be like, well, you're just listening to the wrong Christian music. Like, let me show you the stuff that is really great. So I wanted to try to draw attention to that good work. Jess Ray is another great songwriter, and she's doing some cool work in that world, like creating playlists to help people discover great music and that kind of thing. But like, Marilyn Robinson, who won the Pulitzer Prize for her novel Gilead. Is a believer. Catherine Patterson won like 2 Newbery honors and wrote Bridge to Terabithia, and like is one of the most revered children's authors in American history. And she was a strong believer. So there are a lot of Christians doing that work. They just aren't the ones that you'll see in the typical book list,
Yeah.
Right.
So I think, and so the third thought that I have, but I think it's important to point out that sometimes like Christian movies get a bad rap, right? And I don't particularly like a movie that feels like it's got a message in it. I just want to watch a great story. And again, God can use whatever he wants, so I'm not bashing it. It's hard to make a movie. I don't want to be arrogant about it, but anybody who's ever sat down with their family and thought, let's find a good movie to watch on Netflix, can tell you that it's not just Christians making bad movies.
Yeah,
that's true.
For sure.
Right? There's
Yes,
1,000 stupid movies out there. I'm a million. And if you want to go to the bookstore and browse the aisles, you're like, it's not just Christians writing bad novels. It's humans writing bad novels. And like, we got to find, that's why the good stuff, we need help finding the good stuff. And we need to read it because of the quality of its work, right? And let the good stuff that's going to last make its way to you. And not just read it because it's an Amish romance. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
which again,
that
sounds really snide. I should back up on that and say, if that's what you love, that's fine. But just know that there's more out there.
That's good.
There's a lot of great stuff out there. I mean, Les Mis, Victor Hugo, arguably good. Charles Dickens. The Christians have a long history of making some of the greatest art that there is, and I think it's still happening. I really think that, like, there are a lot of people who are, Leif Enger is another one, who are writing amazing novels that don't make it to the Christian book list because they're brave enough to kind of write stories that are out there in the mainstream. But that doesn't make them any less Christian.
I'm so grateful for that answer. That's so good. Andrew, I'd love to ask you just 2 more questions if you don't mind. But the first one was about the Rabbit Room. You started this ministry to cultivate Christian art, Christian creativity, which I'm so grateful for. It's beautiful work, needs to be done. I'm glad you're the one doing it. Help us think about, for the listener who typically turns into our podcast and maybe is thinking about their family, and they hear you talking about how musical your family is, how you told stories, and they're trying to maybe think in their head, how do I cultivate creativity the way you're trying to do, maybe in a broader sense? How can I do that in my own home? And maybe it came naturally to you, but can you think of like, how can we encourage a mom or a dad to think about how do you cultivate creativity for your kids as you're raising them?
Sure. Well, once again, I've got 3 points I would like to share with you. Not really. The first thing I would say is to remind parents that the arts only make up a slice of the pie of creativity. that creativity is writing curriculum and making podcasts and building bridges and figuring out the best medical treatment for someone. That like God made us inherently creative. That's part of the way we carry his image, is that we can't help but be creative. That's just the thing. And I think sometimes that's why I kind of balk a little bit when people use the word creatives, because I want to be like, it makes it sound like there's this class of people who are specifically creative, and that it's artists don't have a corner on the market. So your kid, like when you talk about a home full of creativity, that also could be math and science and engineering and whatever. It's just look for the thing that lights your kid up and fan the flame. Let them explore. That's my thing. I mean, for us, I think our kids ended up so musical and my son Aiden is a visual artist too. And it was funny at Christmas dinner last year, we were all together, our kids and their spouses and our granddaughter, we're all at the table. And I realized that every single person at the table is self-employed. We're all like, every April, we're all feeling self-employment tax and calling each other about how bad it is. But it's like they've just got this entrepreneurial, artistic bent. All of the kids do. And I think that's partly just the fruit of growing up in Nashville and in a community with the Rabbit Room right here. And also the fact that the creative, artistic community that our kids grew up in was also very seamlessly integrated with our faith. And, a lot of the people that we would listen to on a regular basis, we also received communion next to at church on Sundays, And so our kids didn't grow up with this hard divide between our career and our artist life and our life of faith. Like the things were always together. And, you'd have to ask them about what their experience is like. They've all got their own story happening, but I think that that's part of it. And the other thing I'd say is, just as a musician, I was very wary of making my kids feel like I expected them to also be musicians. So we didn't force piano lessons or violin lessons or anything like that. Maybe I could have gotten away with it, but I just wanted to err on the side of letting them be their own person. However, I did leave guitars laying around, and I would
with candy bars on them.
Yes, exactly.
Or tell them not to touch it, make it off limits.
Whatever you do,
don't touch that guitar.
But they just kind of gravitated to it naturally, and I think that it was an easy thing. And they're also just super gifted at what they do. So that's what I would say.
Well, I appreciate a lot about that answer, because I do think families pressure themselves by not looking like other families all the time, right? So why aren't I like that? Or why isn't my kid like this? Why I see that family do this? And I do like you're leaving that room to say, hey, creativity looks different, but so can your family. And I do think there's a version, though, of your creativity in songwriting and in story writing that also touches on another thing that a lot of parents, including me, deal with, which is that sense of facing scrutiny from my kids. You have a public version of creativity. You're going to put a song out. You're going to put a story out, and you're going to deal with what people think about you because of it. I know I have. We've written a lot of nonfiction and encouraged, and I would love to write fiction more than anything. But that sense of going, here's a story I came up with, and feeling like, is that any good? Is this worth looking at? And I can't tell you how long my family, we've kicked around, hey, should we try fiction? We've done nonfiction, so should we try fiction? It's intimidating to say, what do you think of me almost when you put something out there? I love what you said about a song gets its own life, a story gets its own life, but it doesn't always start like that. It starts with maybe some courage to say, how kids, what do you think of this? Or putting myself out there a little bit. I'm wondering if you could share, how have you personally dealt with any sense of insecurity or scrutiny when it comes to what you've done now for a while in songwriting, story writing, and encouraging others to do the same?
Man, that's a great question. First of all, you have to write a fiction book. Like, Adam, get busy.
Andrew just told you have to do it.
Yeah, now I have to quit. Yep.
And the thing is, write it first of all for your kids or for a specific small audience, and let them be the ones to help you know if this is something worth publishing and doing. But that shouldn't stop you from doing it, because I think the exercise of learning how a story works, like I think in my book Adorning the Dark, which is kind of about the creative process. One of the things I try to get across is this idea that being a writer doesn't mean writing. Being a writer means finishing. Like
Yeah.
you there's something that you learn when you get to the end of a story, first draft, right? When you cross that finish line, about how a story works that you cannot learn any other way, right? You have to find a way to get to the end of the story. And then you have told a story. You haven't just written a chapter or two, you've told a story. And I think that process of submitting yourself to the scrutiny of your friends who are going to read first drafts and your own scrutiny, right? Like, cause you've got to have an inner critic. You got to make, my friend Jonathan Rogers says, you have to make friends with your inner critic. And so, which means, if that voice in your head is telling you're terrible at this, or that's a bad sentence, or this is a dumb story, you say, hey, I appreciate you, but I need you to come back when I'm done, and then let's talk, right? And then turn on your critic and ask yourself questions about the story. And so yeah, scrutiny can be really good. It's one of the things that makes me stay up that extra hour to make sure the song is as good as it can be, because I'm going to play it for my friends who are better songwriters than me, and then you do the work in community, and the community is what kind of helps raise your bar and help the thing shapes into something else. But then the final thing I would say is that it's so funny. Everything that you've asked me, I've had 3 points. Is that you are more like the thing that is really happening whenever you're making something like a book or a song. The thing that you're making is important. Yes, that is a good thing. But there's something that's happening to you that outlasts the thing that you're making. Like, you are the song that is really being written while you are writing the song. Like, somehow it is shaping your heart. It's teaching you things about the mind of God. It's giving you a way to express your love to someone that you wouldn't have any other way. There's the soul shaping that happens in creative work, I think, that is valuable apart from the success of the thing made. So scrutiny can be painful, yes, but man, some of the best bits of advice I ever got hurt super bad. And so, yeah. And the thing that gives you the courage to muscle through that, the difficulty of being critiqued or whatever, is love. Like, if the thing you're writing, I think art at its best is a way of loving people. And so if you're writing the book to make yourself feel cool, or to self-validate, or to leave your mark on the world or whatever, those are pretty empty goals. But if you're writing the story because you love your kid, then it's like, it gives you the courage to try to listen to the advice, because you're like, I don't really care about my feelings. I care about making this book as good as it can be.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good. I want to go back really quick to parents, to listeners who might be curious about how to foster that creativity in their home, and just say a couple of things, because that is a deep desire in the Bryant household, is that our home would just be a safe place to be curious and create and make messes. And that was kind of the first hurdle, especially for my husband, who's a very clean and tidy person, was lack of screen time, letting them be bored.
Yes.
So parents, if you're listening, like, hey, just release some of that control over their time, their schedule, and let them just have room. And if that's building with Legos and Magnetiles, or if that's leaving art supplies out, or for my middle daughter, it might be a puzzle that takes way longer than I'd like it to be out. Those types of things. And so it's kind of just knowing it's such a short season of life. Like, it really is. I mean, I'm just looking down. I mean, we still have 7 years with our oldest before she graduates, but it feels like time's moving faster and faster. I'm like, we can deal with a messy house for another 7 to 12 years if it means that they are people who love to like create and are curious and love to learn and make. And so that would be my encouragement to parents who are curious about fostering that in their home. It might be loud, it might be messy, and that's okay. I would just say embrace it, and it doesn't need to fit in a lot of little boxes or be totally organized. But
man, I totally agree. I was going to say, like, seeing your kid do something they love is one of the best feelings in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
And I also have to remind myself that is how God sees us when we're, like the Eric Little thing. I feel God's pleasure when I run, that whole thing. Our middle son, Asher, who's now a record producer, he was a drummer. I bought him his first drum set when he was like 15 or whatever. And his bedroom was directly over me and Jamie's bedroom. And he would play until midnight. He would be up there just banging on the drums, working stuff out, learning songs. And our ceiling fan would just rattle above our bed. And we were never sad about it. We were always like, I would gladly, and I'm not tooting my own horn. It made us so happy to hear him pour his heart into this creative work, that it was worth the inconvenience.
Yeah. And that's the key word, I think, is inconvenience, because I don't want to stifle or quench that in my kids, but sometimes that means I have to kind of die to my own preferences or my own convenience. But okay. Last question. We ask all of our guests this question, and it's just, how can we be praying for you and for the Peterson family?
Oh man, thank you. We are coming up on a very busy season. The Behold the Lamb of God tour is coming up right after Thanksgiving, and it's the 25th anniversary of the tour, which is crazy. And we're going to be doing a chunk of show. We're going to be in Texas, of course, but then we're going to head over to the UK and do a string of shows there. Cool. For the first time, which is very logistically complicated to get that big of a band overseas. So it's a lot, but it's also exciting.
Yeah.
And then we're working on seasons 3 and 4 of the Wingfeather Saga right now, which is a blast. Those are the big. So I guess I would just say, without getting too personal, it's just a busy season. Jamie works so hard. She's the hospitality ninja, and we're very involved in hospitality stuff at the Rabbit Room and work and being a grandparent and all the things. So we're just we're enjoying this season of life a lot, but we could always use prayer for energy and wisdom. Being a parent of 20-year-olds is not necessarily easier than being a parent of 5-year-olds.
I hear that from empty nesters, that it's in some ways busier and harder than they expected.
Yeah. And you never stop learning about your own mistake, your capacity for making mistakes as a parent. It keeps happening, and you keep having to learn to forgive and find each other and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't change a whole lot.
Yeah.
Well, I'm certain our listeners and we will be praying for those things. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Andrew, thanks for being on with us today.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening, friends. If you think it's as important as we do to disciple your families, please help us out by giving us a great review wherever you listen to podcasts. Visit one of our sponsors and share this episode with one of your friends. And if you want to keep up with us or join the conversation, you can always follow the Family Discipleship Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, or go to familydiscipleship.com. We love you, listeners, and we're looking forward to another new episode that'll get to you next week.